Okay, more with the interview with Shigeru Miyamoto. N-Guy Kroll from Fast Company asks, where were you when you heard Captain Lou Albano passed away, and what was your reaction? You're the one who just told me, Shigeru says. He's the guy who played Mario in the old Mario cartoon live action show. Really cool guy. Really awesome voice too. Well, Chris Buffa from AOL Game Daily asks, so it always seems like you had... Okay. So it always seems like you have your hand in so many projects at once. How do you make sure that all this stuff gets done on time, and what are some of your work philosophies but also bad habits? As far as what I do to make sure that titles don't get behind schedule, essentially all my titles end up getting behind schedule at some point, so there's really nothing I can say about that. But what I can say that we do with our development is, as the technology has advanced, the graphics have become obviously much more beautiful than they used to be, and the sound in games is much more advanced than it used to be, and both of these elements that require a great deal of resources to create. I think a lot of times people will try to put all of the graphics in a game and put all the sound into the game and then evaluate the game at that point. What we really try to focus on is the framework or skeleton of the game. If there are elements that absolutely have to have sound in order for us to make a determination as to whether or not they affect the gameplay elements, we will include the sound in these elements. If there are elements that absolutely have to have graphics, we will include those graphics, but we won't complete the sound or graphics for the entire game. Instead, what we do is we look strictly at the skeleton framework of what the interactive experience is, and it's when we run into issues with the specific framework or a specific skeleton that forms the core of the game. When we find that's not going to be a compelling experience, that's when I tend to upend the T-table. And so that generally happens before all of the effort has been put in on the graphics and sound. That's the one thing that we do I feel important to help us keep on track. And then I generally get very deeply involved in individual projects in the later stages as they're really refining the level design and polishing the game. And in terms of my bad habits in development, I would say that it's probably commonly considered within Nintendo that my bad habit, even when the programmers are telling me, we can't change the program anymore, we have to stop. I keep telling them to make changes to make things better. So my job is really to seduce the programmers into doing what I want them to do. Joystick asks, probably the same guy from before, so I'm not going to scroll back up the season name, but anyway. I don't know if you've had a chance to play Little Big Planet, but lots of people make Mario levels in that game, so there's an obvious interest for users to make their own Mario levels. Do you see maybe opening up a creation tool to the community in the future? Miyamoto's answer. That is an area that I have a lot of interest in, and I think that the side-scrolling Mario games in particular are very well suited for that type of thing. So of course the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series is one that made in Nintendo by Nintendo's... So of course the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series is one that's made in North America by Nintendo Software Technology, but it's one I've been involved in, and from early on we did have a lot of discussions about how to enable that type of level creation. And of course most recently on the DSi we have Flipnote Studio, which is another utility or tool type of software that lets users create and share with others. And I think that those types of interactive experiences are going to continue to broaden, and we'll see a lot more user-generated content moving forward. And I've always had an interest in those types of creative tools, so I'd definitely be open to that sometime in the future. Chris Plant from Yu-Gi-Oh! Asks, this game has many references to a lot of previous Mario games. The Coin Collect mode actually reminds me of the Game Boy Color Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, the King Koopa redesign for the SNES, and the Coin Collect mode that we saw from the original Mario Bros. I was curious if this was a sort of a best of Mario or Mario's greatest hits for you, and also if there are references that you haven't shown yet that you'd like to talk about. Miyamoto's answer. We've actually collected a lot of different elements from a lot of different Mario games, and one of the things that we like to do is, obviously, there are a lot of fans out there that have a lot of favorite elements in Mario games, and we want to try and make them happy and bring back some of the favorites in the past. But I don't know everything that we have and haven't shown at this point, so it's hard for me to think as to whether or not there are any more in there we can share. But as you pointed out, the Coin Battle mode is definitely an homage back to the original two-player Mario Brothers game, and there are a lot of elements that we've brought together from the past games. The main feature, of course, this time is the multiplayer, and trying to really use that while taking advantage of some of the older features and really having the multiplayer element play them up in new ways. I guess there are two things, one that I can talk about and one that I can't go into detail on. One of the 5 coin battle stages is kind of a parody slash almost alternate reality, I guess, of the original Mario 1-1 world. If you've played a Mario game and you think you know what that world will look like, when you play it in the coin battle mode, you will be very surprised. And then another one I'm not supposed to talk about is the final boss at the end of World 8. I think is something that will feel fresh and new, but at the same time feel very much like a parody of a past game. James Brightman of Industry Gamers asked, I was wondering, obviously everyone expects this game to do well here, but the Japanese video game industry has been on the decline in the past couple of years. Does that concern you at all, and what do you think the main problem is for the Japanese market? I think it's not simply a matter of nothing is selling in Japan anymore, particularly if you look at New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. I think we sold through about 5 million copies of that game in the Japanese market alone, and in fact the Japanese sell-through had been stronger than the sell-through in both North America and Europe until very recently. And that was part of the factor of how strong the DS business was in Japan at that time. I think another really good example that's really recent is Dragon Quest IX on the DS in Japan, which probably at this point has already sold through, I would guess, more than 3 million in a short period of time. So I think what we're seeing in the Japanese market is not that the market as a whole is suffering. We're still seeing that high-quality titles are still doing very well. But I think perhaps what's changed is, while in the past other titles would perform adequately, now some of the other titles are maybe not performing as well. Gonna end this here.